much to another really fascinating travel around Reydon and Southwold and the general area. Not Southwold tonight? All right.
No, we only want Reydon.
No.
No, it's Reydon tonight.
Beg your pardon. Rewind. Reydon. David Moyse. Thanks, David.
God. Well, that was a good start with the bold busting, weren't it? That was a good start, that was. Good job we got a spare one. And even that was busted, so it was a good job we got another. However, like you just been told, this is the 25th one of these I've done. And a quarter of a century seems only like a couple of 3 days ago as far as I'm concerned, but time do fly. It was in 1986 when Mr. Riley was the chairman. By then I thought I'd got enough pictures to put on a show. So I went and saw him and he said, yeah, this is great, we'll have a go. So anyway, we did. And they charged the people 25 pence to come in. Well, that's fair enough. Anyway, we filled the hall and eventually, after a period of time, they said, will you do it again? I said, yeah, I'll do it again. I said, but not 25 pence each for people. So I said, well, okay then, 50 pence. I said, yeah, okay, we'll have a go at that. Filled the hall again. I was filling the hall. And after I'd done the first show, I said if there was anybody who got any photographs or postcards that they could loan me, sell me, give me, do what you like. I'll nick them if I can get hold of them, but that's few and far between, I'm afraid. But beyond all my wildest dreams, I had people help me in all sorts of ways. And I had postcards, I had photographs, and I copied them. And from then on, I filled the hall. I think every night we've had. Is there anybody here who saw the first show? Rotten lot. You see, yeah, well, because you would, you. That's quite understandable, that is. However, we done it, and that's how it went on, and it's been going ever since. As I say, this is number 25. Now tonight, it's going to be nothing like you've seen before. There's it, the bulb keep going. What I'm going to do, I'm going to show first of all a few pictures of old Reydon, which I put in the first show. And then I'm going to show some pictures of Reydon that has gone on in the past 25 years, hopefully. I'll show you some pictures of the Christmas lights as we've been taking them over a period of time. And I really don't know. But at the end of the show, at the end of the night, as some of you may know, I judged the photographs for the Reydon show, which of course I can't enter, obviously. So I'm going to show you one or two of what I think are some of the best pictures I took over the past 25 years. So hopefully everything will go according to that. In the meantime, I want to keep fiddling with this thing. So, with a bit of luck, keep your fingers crossed, and here we go. Oh dear. Well, we all know what that is, don't we? There we go. Now, I've got at home the actual description of this sign, which was produced by the late Peter Gerald, and it explains what all the bits and pieces are, which is quite a thing. Obviously, the oak tree is what can we say? It's the backbone of the a natural part of our world. The sheaves of corn represent agriculture. The cogwheel, which is round the outside of the cross in the middle, obviously the cross is the Christianity of the village. The brick wall is the substantial way that the people in the village, shall we say, mould themselves together. And the cross in the middle obviously is Christianity. The cog round the outside of the cross represents the blacksmith, which is long gone. And so that is the principle of what the village sign consists of. Now the church, of course, obviously is the oldest building in the village. That one invariably happens in all villages. Normally, 9 times out of 10, the church is the oldest. And here you see a picture of the church taken a long while before the conker trees were grown. And it's a lovely church, apart from the fact that the tower is not that particularly high. It's only 65.5 feet. The reason for that is, of course, the church is built on the highest point in the village, which normally happens in most villages. So being we were about 47 feet above sea level, there was no need to go much higher than 60 feet to make it 100 feet above the sea. And from the scenery from the top of that tower is absolutely fantastic. However, in 1923, Mr. Forward, who is long gone, went round the church to take some photographs, and as you can see here, the angel that's in the churchyard is there. Now that was put there about 1920, and the conker trees are beginning to grow. You can see the holly tree, which is still there obviously, but tremendously much bigger. And inside the church at that particular time is roughly the same as what it is now. The organ is in the same place. The lights, of course, were paraffin. You can see one hanging down, you can hardly see it, it's right in front of the east window, but they were lovely oil lamps. And they were on a pulley with a rope cord down the wall, and you undone the cord and that came down on to the ground to fill it up with paraffin. And when they put electricity onto the church, they disappeared, and that's a shame because I've got no idea where they went, because they were wonderful things. The organ had been moved a couple of times since this picture was taken. First of all, it was put in the bottom of the tower, and then it was moved against the north side, right opposite the entrance to the main door into the church. And there that remained until just before the new room was built. And that's the oil lamps. Look how lovely things they were. And I would have loved to have got hold of one or two of them. But there we are, we couldn't, so that was that. Now we see the first little school, and Mrs. Gray is the headmistress. And you can see the little saplings that were growing in the yard, and last week the last one was cut down. He eventually gave up the goose during the summer, and he obviously had to come down, so he disappeared last week, and that was the last one. And that's a shame, but there we are, that's how it goes. And all the others have all gone. One fell down about 2 years ago, and luckily enough that went into the church car park and not onto the building. But if it had gone onto the building, that would have been the end of that. 1866 that was built. It was built to accommodate 34 children, and at the highest they ever had was 28. So they didn't do so bad. Apparently they knew that the photographer was coming there that day, so I suppose that was the day there was 28 turned up. that was the children at the school, and they were poor little people. They really were. I mean, the majority of the parents, of course, the fathers were farm labourers, and they hadn't got a great deal of wealth. Some of them, poor little kids, hadn't even got any shoes on. The one on the right hand side there, the other ones have got holes in the boots.
Yeah.
But there we are. That's how it was over 100 years ago, and right up till then, and a lot of it later. But there we are. But in 1908, this school, part of the school, was built, and there you see it's in full flower. The gardens are all done, and the job is finished. It started off first of all with 3 classrooms, and then a year later another one was built on. And the one that was built on was right on the right-hand side, and you can see where the join in the roof is, look across there, where this piece was put on. There's a good shaky hand, look at that. What have I been doing? However, that's the school in 1908, and my dad went there the first day that opened. This is the first Reydon post office, and there is the house is still there, obviously, on the entrance to School Lane. And the house was like this when I was born, but I can't remember it because it was changed when I was a year old. And I was born in that little room there. My mother was there at the time, which I found rather embarrassing. But there we are. And it was the blacksmiths as well, the blacksmith shop and the post office was all in one. And on the flagpole there's a sign which says traps for sale, for hire. So we'll have a look at them in a minute. Now there's the blacksmith shop, and that's Mr. Doy, the blacksmith. Now the letter box was in one part of the window, just there. That's where you could put your letters in there. If you had parcels, you had to open the middle window and shut them through the window. You couldn't buy postal orders there, but you could cash them. If you wanted a postal order to buy a postal order, you had to go to Southwold. The mail from here went through Wangford at the time, and it was collected in the morning about 7 o'clock, and the last lot was delivered to you up till about 8:30 at night. Now this eventually closed, I should imagine, about 1909 or 10. It was certainly about that time because my father remembered coming here to buy postage stamps, so he would have been 5 in 1909, and then it moved down, of course, to Blackwater. And if you don't know where Blackwater is, you ain't been in Reydon long enough. However, that was the first post office, and there's the postmistress. Now you can see that sign, but on the post there above the lamp, traps for hire, and that was Mrs. Doy, Amelia, and there are the traps. Now the same sort of thing as our taxis, and they would meet people at the railway station and take them to their destinations, and vice versa. The Randolph Hotel was born as you know, was built in 1899, and if you look carefully, well, that window there, just by the side of the of this piece that sticks out, that window there, you will see on the next picture that was blocked off, and that little white building was put on. Now that was called the Bottle and Jug, because you could go there and you could buy a bottle of beer, or you could take a jug and they would fill it up with however much you wanted, depending on how big your jug was, because they tried to put 2 pints in a 1 pint pot and that didn't work. So I used to go in there when I was a kid. They never used to bother. You'd go in there and you could, if you told them that you wanted a packet of cigarettes for your father, they'd let you have them. So we used to go in there and say, I want 5 Woodbines. I'd usually nick the box of matches from indoors. If they go and have a bottle of 5 Woodbines, I'd say, how do you want them for? I want them for me dad. Righto, 5 Woodbines. And the way he used to go, and we used to smoke them on the way home. And that was one of them things. Oh, that's good fun. It didn't do any harm. But that was the Bottle and Jug. When you went in, there was a little wicker in the front of, and you used to knock on that, and then all of a sudden that would lift up and this face would appear. What do you want? You know, oh, some fags. But that was funny old days. Good fun though. Now this is Reydon Corner, would you believe? You're looking up to Halesworth Road on the left-hand side and up the Wankford Road in front of you. Now there was a big bank, as you can see, all the way down the hill, and it went all the way around the corner where the Christmas lights are, and it went right up the Lowestoft Road almost to where we are now, and it was a big bank. There it is. And over the bank on the left-hand side was all allotments. And all this land belonged to Mr. Loftus, who was our MP, and he lived in the big house just across the road here, what's now known as Oaklands. And he owned all this land, and he gave it to the village, including the land where this village hall stands. And that was all dug out by hand and carted to Blythburgh. And if you go along the A12, just before you get to the bridge, there's rather a high bank on the left-hand side, and that bank was made up by the soil that come off this corner right up to where we are here, and right round the corner into Wankford Road. There's the bank going along, as I said, almost up to where we are, look. And the post office is on the side where that man is standing. And that's the entrance to Seaview Road, right down on the bottom right-hand corner. And all that bank was all dug out, all by hand. And those are the men who done it. And that was a fantastic job. And now of course, you've got all that flat land all the way round, and where the allotments are now, of course, are all bungalows. And you have that rather pretty flower beds and one thing another on the corner. And in 1949, us boys from school, well, I was 12, there was a load of us come down here and planted the trees, what were there. And unfortunately now the majority of them are gone. And it was when you look back, it was unfortunate that they planted poplars, because a poplar tree is not a long-lived tree. That was unfortunate that they planted that type, but we would have been far better off now, and we would still have them if they'd have had trees that had a longer life. Maybe oaks, maybe yew trees, anything like that will live for hundreds of years. But unfortunately the poplars aren't quite like that. And it was a shame to see them come down, really, because the one that I planted was right on the bottom of the hill, and it was only a year before that was cut down that one of the rooks built his nest in it. And I thought, well, that's nice, he's built a nest in my tree. And then the next thing I knew, there was a bloke down there with a grinder cutting the root out. I thought, well, oh dear. But there we are. Lowestoft Road, of course, was a busy part of Reydon. And originally, of course, our village wasn't round this part, it was up round the church. But obviously in the days of the Black Death and one thing and another, the village moved down here. And that happened in a lot of places. And of course the houses at that time were wood, so they would have all been burned. And people moved a mile away from the church, and our village centred around this part. There's the post office. You know, you see on the postcard is Blackwater. That's the area of the village that has always been known by that name. That incorporates all Seaview Road and Crag Road and all the area along round there, all known as Blackwater. It's the original post office. Well, there was a lady come and saw me from Felixstowe last week, and she is trying to sort out her family tree. And one of her, or it was her grandfather, actually took this post office at the first time, He was a Mr. Roberts, apparently. And apparently he hadn't been there very long before he committed suicide. And so perhaps it's rather strange. But it was a shame, but there we are. And at the inquest that just said that he took his life while the balance of his mind was unsteady. So the actual first postmaster here didn't last very long. Because apparently that was about 1909, 1910. As Seaview Road, obviously unmade. That was still unmade in the 1950s. Because can you remember the first little Ford Anglias that had the rear window that cut back inwards? I've got a photograph of one of them standing in that road, and that was still unmade then. And because there was nothing at the end, it went straight out to the cliffs at Easton. There's no buildings across there at all. And Herne Crag Road was exactly the same. It was just wide open to the sea. Alexandra Terrace, of course, that's all part of Lowestoft Road. We're getting down near where we are here, almost. And the houses that were built right down, and the bungalows that were built right down the bottom of Seaview Road. I was talking to a man who lived down there one day, and he said, "How far did the water come up here?" He said, "In the 1953 flood." I said, "Well, I can't tell you, old friend." I said, "Because we couldn't get anywhere near it. Because you couldn't get down to Reydon Corner. And the dip in the road right opposite where we are now was full with water. And the water went 3 parts of the way up Covert Road, right up past the almshouses. So you couldn't get to Seaview Road or any of these houses. Then we come to the almshouses, which were opened in 1908. A man by the name of Andrew Matthews bought the land from the East Coast Development Company, who bought the Southwold farm and all the land along the front of the town and the front of the between the houses and the cliff. They built the Grand Hotel and the pier, and they built the Pier Avenue Road. And some land belonged to the Southwold Corporation. They also owned land in Reydon. There was some in Halesworth Road, some in the Wangford Road, and this lot in Covert Road. And that was all put up for sale in August 1899. And all the land was all marked out into building plots, all the way down Pier Avenue, North Road, into Courtly Road, and all round that way. And it was all sold off in plots. And Mr. Matthews, he bought 4 plots here for £300, and in 1908 he had these houses built. Mr. and Mrs. Adolphus Holmes was the mayor. You can see him standing here on the left-hand side. And Ellen and Andrew Matthews was also there with them. And the Reverend Hope Sutton, you can see him on the right. And the man in the middle is Ernest Reed Cooper, who was the town clerk at Southwold, secretary to the lifeboat, and a prominent man. And that was a crowd of people that gathered round at the opening. These particular things at the entrance to the gateways were for maintenance tools to be kept. And when I was a young lad, I said that these were houses for elderly people. And I looked at these thing, and I thought, well, I must put an old person in there with a pointed head. However, if you look on the one nearest us up the other side from where we are now, you'll see on the first one here that's got homes of rest, and on the other side that's got for the aged, and then that's got a piece blanked off. Well, underneath that piece what's blanked off is the word poor. and that was what they were built for. They were built for the homes of rest for the aged and poor. And of course, poor is not a very nice word to use nowadays, according to the powers that be, so that was cemented over. And they're rather attractive houses on the outside. They do look quite attractive, but inside they were absolutely bare minimum. There was no ceilings, and I know this is a fact because I've been in them when I was a little boy, because my mum was friendly with one of the ladies who lived there. The walls were not plastered, they were just red brick, and when you stood in the kitchen or stood anywhere and looked up, you just saw the rafters going right up into the ridge of the roof. There was nothing there really of a great deal of comfort. The only thing that was there was a kitchen range, an old cast iron kitchen range, cupboards each side of it to air your clothes, and that was about it. I mean, you could bring whatever furniture you wanted, and you had no problems, but they were absolutely bare minimum inside. It was 1932, and I believe that was the date when they put the statue in the middle of the lady sitting there. She's knitting, I think, or doing something like that, sewing or something. But it's quite a nice statue, actually. It's quite attractive. Mount Pleasant, of course, is another unmade road. And at the far end of that was the Southwold Steam Laundry. And we worked there for a little while at a delivery van. Weren't much of a place. Didn't like the forewoman anyway. She was a witch. Well, we all thought she was anyway. I think she was actually. I'm pretty convinced about that. And of course the shop on the corner was Peter's granddad's and Peter Boyden's. And there you can see his grandfather's bike leaning against the wall there, which he used to load up. And he weren't a very big man. He had a big bushy moustache, and he used to ride round the village with this thing, and the stuff was piled right high, and he could just see his eyes over the top of the big boxes that he had in this thing. He piled them up, a bit like that boy in the your Granville, yeah, exactly like that. Only he didn't have motor horns and flags and things on it, but he was a poor little man. He was a funny little boy. He usually got a fag on. That's a wonder he didn't used to set light to the cardboard boxes. And then, of course, further up the Mount Pleasant was the chapel, and there's quite a number of people who were killed in the First World War on the monument in the churchyard at Reydon. There's also about 5 or 6 graves in Reydon churchyard with men's names on who died in the First World War, and some of them are not on the memorial. And outside this one is another list of men who died in the First World War who were members of this chapel. So there was quite a number of people lost, I'm afraid, from our village, and I think the male number of people in the village at that particular time was rather few and far between. They were either too young to do anything or too old. This is the inside of the chapel. It's a rare picture. Now this is the Quay Inn down in the bottom of Quay Lane, right down near the marshes. That was a beer house, and that was the gamekeeper at the time. This photograph was taken in 1893, and the 2 little windows in the gable end were what were known as smugglers' windows, and of course they could see out there down to the River Blythe, and if there was nobody about and the coast was clear, they would put a little candle in the window so that the smugglers knew that was clear for them to bring the contraband ashore. And of course there was plenty of that went on down there. This was a shooting party. They always used to manage to work it so they finished up there at lunchtime, so they could go inside and have a bottle of beer. Now that's a very, very rare picture taken indoors in the Quay Inn, and it was, in those days photography was rather primitive, so I think that was a tremendous thing that the photographer got a picture like this in those days. The old bottles of beer, big pint bottles.